Nora Keating believed silence could shelter a wounded heart, as well as stone walls. In the years since her marriage unraveled, the 45-year-old copy editor cultivated a private kingdom on the second-floor terrace of her ivy-striped townhouse. Rows of lavender, pots of jasmine, and one stubborn night-blooming cereus that refused to open for anyone but her. The garden smelled of patience and regret. It was enough until the new man next door appeared with a watering can the color of fresh limes. His name was Elias Mercer, a soft-spoken horticulturist hired by the old widow in Unit 7. Nora first noticed him beneath a sky the pale blue of pressed forget-me-nots. Kneeling among terracotta planters, Elias moved with a measured tenderness, coaxing life from wilting basil as though apologizing for the sun. From her balcony she watched, tea cooling between her palms, wondering what it might feel like to be handled so carefully. Curiosity dripped in like rain through cracked grout. Each afternoon she found herself timing coffee breaks to coincide with his visits, just to glimpse the play of muscle beneath faded chambray sleeves, the way a single dark curl escaped his cap whenever he bent forward. That minor rebellion of hair unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The street was hushed that Thursday when fate or whim decided to meddle. Nora had bought an exotic fern at the weekend market, believing its spiral leaves suited her taste for controlled eccentricity. Yet 3 days later, the edges browned, betraying her careful watering schedule. Pride kept her from searching a remedy. Pride and something else, an excuse to speak to the man whose gentleness disturbed her nights. She descended the iron stairwell, fern-cradled like an errant child, and crossed the mosaic path separating their buildings. Elias knelt beside the widow's roses, misting them in lazy arcs. Water droplets glimmered on thorny stems like captive stars. "Hello," she began, embarrassed by the tremor hiding in her throat. "I think my fern is plotting suicide." He shaded his eyes with a damp glove, studying the plant as though it were a secret map. Up close, she noticed faint lines at the corners of his sea-glass eyes-proof. He smiled often. "May I?" He asked. His gloved fingers brushed hers when he took the pot. The contact was accidental. The echo it left in her pulse was not. He carried the fern to a wrought iron table, inspecting soil, stems, the curl of each leaf with almost priestly devotion. Nora stood a breath behind, enthralled by the hush of his concentration. "Overwatered," he concluded gently. "These like to flirt with drought. Give the roots room to ache a little makes them stronger." She bit the inside of her lip at the metaphor, feeling dangerously seen. "I suppose I've been smothering it," she said. "It can be tempting." "To drown a thing you love," Elias replied, a voice low enough to blur the line between botany and confession. A single raindrop tapped Nora's shoulder, a warning shot from the slate clouds overhead. Elias noticed, tilting his chin skyward. "The storm's coming," he murmured. "Let me show you something before it breaks." He led her along the side of the widow's house to a lean-to greenhouse she'd never noticed. Inside, air shimmered with humidity and citrus. Orchids clung to mossy planks like jeweled moths. Vines curled around hand-tied trellises. Somewhere a hidden speaker played old jazz at a shy volume. Nora's breath hitched. The place felt secret, a pocket universe. Grown from longing, Elias set the ailing fern on a cedar bench. "She'll recover here," he said. "Light's tempered, humidity's right," and he lifted a slim copper mister. "No heavy showers. Just whispers." She watched him adjust the lamp, his hands confident yet reverent, and thought of the nights she lay awake counting the beats of an empty bed. A sharp stab of loneliness flared, bold and humiliating dot as if sensing it. Elias turned. "Gardens are patient listeners," he said. "They hear what we don't say." Nora swallowed. "What if the story is too heavy for roots and leaves?" "Then it seeps into the caretaker," he answered. "And he chooses whether to bear it." Lightning flickered beyond fogged glass, silvering the fine hairs on his forearm. Instinct urged her to retreat, yet her feet stayed planted in damp gravel. "I should check my balcony," she murmured. "I'll walk you back," he offered. They exited just as rain rehearsed its opening notes, a soft percussion on tile roofs. The world smelled metallic, charged. Halfway up the stairwell, Nora slipped. Elias steadied her with a hand at her waist, the other braced against the rail. Their faces hovered inches apart, rain threading through the air like needle-fine glass. She felt the heat of him despite the chill. A memory long buried surfaced, a honeymoon in Amalfi, her body pressed to stone still warm from sunset. That woman felt remote. Yet with Ilias's palm against her ribs, she could almost taste lemon rind and sea salt again. On her balcony, wind whipped stray lavender sprigs across wet slate. She retrieved the fern from him, fingers sliding along his wrist. Static cracked between their skin, perhaps only weather, but it felt like warning. "Thank you," she said. Her tone tried for casual, that landed close to pleading. "Anytime," he answered. But before he turned, his gaze dipped to her lips, then lower to the slender silver charm resting at the hollow of her throat, a tiny watering can, gifted by a friend who thought it cute. Eyes widening, he touched the charm lightly, asking permission more with silence than words. The moment his fingertip met the cold silver, thunder boomed overhead. Nora jolted. The chain snapped, falling into his open palm. Rain burst in earnest, drenching them both. He closed his fist around the pendant, expression torn between apology and something deeper, darker. "I'm sorry," he said, voice nearly swallowed by the downpour. "For what?" She managed, "For crossing." A quick breath. "Lines I don't yet understand." Inside, Nora closed the French doors, thunder dimmed by glass. She set the broken necklace on her coffee table beside the lonely teacup, steam long vanished. Outside, Elias below rescued scattered tools, shoulders trembling, not from cold, she suspected, but revelation. She lifted the fern. Tiny droplets clung to its wounded leaves, whispers, not showers. She thought about roots that ache, caretakers who listen, and the peril of drowning what one hopes to save Dot as lightning stitched the horizon. Nora realized her garden was no longer symmetrical, no longer safe. Something had shifted beneath the soil, a tension germinating in secret. And part of her, the reckless part that still remembered Amalfi, wanted to see what bloomed from such forbidden seeds. Morning light seeped through gauzy curtains, turning Nora's bedroom walls a pearl sheen. Outside, the storm had rinsed the city clean. On the balcony, lavender glistened and the fern stood taller, its tips newly green. She felt relief, and a sharper pang she did not name. Propped against the French doors lay a slim parcel, brown paper, green twine. Inside, her necklace, chain expertly soldered, the tiny watering can charm polished bright. A single card bore one line of moss-colored ink. "If the roots still ache, come tonight at 10. The greenhouse is unlocked at 10 o'clock. Too late for polite errands, too early for dawn." Restraint had once been her shield, yet today it felt like a pot grown tight around swelling roots. All afternoon she tried to edit manuscripts, but every comma looked like a question mark. At 9:30 she showered, choosing an ivory dress that skimmed her calves. She left hair loose, studied herself in the mirror tired, yes, but awake. The courtyard was hush except for cicadas. Moonlight silvered Ilias's lime watering can by the widow's gate. She pushed open the greenhouse door. Warm air scented with orchid and damp earth wrapped around her. Somewhere Chet Baker crooned about lost chances. Elias appeared between lemon trees, sleeves rolled, throat shining faintly. He held 2 cups, chamomile and orange peel. He said, "Courage without caffeine." She accepted. Their fingers lingered. "Is courage what we need?" she asked, Maybe honesty, he answered. Same dose. Lanterns hung among vines like suspended moons. He led her to the far wall where her night-blooming Sirius cutting now stood, a single swollen bud poised to open. It will unfold after midnight, he whispered, reverent. One bloom one night. She touched the velvet bud, heart pounding. His nearness radiated heat. The scent of soil, citrus, and something purely him curled through her. They sat on a cedar bench, knees almost touching, watching tiny shivers run through the bud. Jazz faded to a hush broken only by quiet fans. Elias spoke first. My wife feared greenhouses, asthma. I built them anyway, thinking I could control the air. A hollow laugh. You can't engineer grief. I'm sorry, Nora murmured. She's been gone 3 years, he continued, eyes on the flower. Yet every dawn I test humidity, pretending she'd walk in, lungs clear. Pain flashed in his face. She felt it like a mirror. I drowned my marriage, she confessed. Smothered. It was silence and expectation. When he left, I was relieved and ashamed of that relief. Their words hung between orchids like motes in warm light. She set her empty cup aside. Some days I feel hollow, she said. Others overfull. I never know which hurts more. Elias turned her palm upward, tracing the lifeline with a finger. Both mean you're still alive, he whispered. Heat rushed up her throat. She laced their fingers, surprised by her own boldness. His thumb stirred slow circles that sent currents through dormant nerves. Saxophone drifted back in. Low and slow dot the Sirius twitched. Ivory petals eased outward, releasing a ribbon of scent jasmine. Vanilla, whetstone. Tears stung her eyes. Beauty that arrived unannounced, demanded presence, then vanished. A parable of longing. Elias rose, drawing her gently up. His hands settled on her shoulders, steady but tense. Tell me to stop. He said she didn't. She cupped his jaw, felt the rasp of day-old stubble. Their mouths met, tentative, tasting of chamomile and thunder. The kiss deepened, heat spiraling until she pulled back, breathless. Guilt flickered, an old reflex. We're strangers, she whispered. Is that safer than this? His voice was raw. Her silence held equal parts yes and no. A soft pop, the Sirius fully unfurled, a white star glowing gold at its heart. Elias switched off the misters. Stillness wrapped them. I want tonight to be what it is, he said, not what it demands later. She nodded and pressed the mended necklace into his palm. Keep it. Give it back when you know the line you crossed. His fingers closed over the charm, eyes searching hers. Will you return when it blooms again? It may not, she reminded gently. Maybe never. Roots ache, he said, repeating himself. That's how they grow. A breeze rattled a pane, urging decision. Nora moved to the door, pulse racing. She glanced back. Elias stood beside the luminous flower, the tiny charm dangling like captured moonlight. She walked home slowly through the cool courtyard. On her balcony, she paused. Inside the greenhouse, lanterns glimmered, his silhouette kneeling prayer or surrender. She couldn't tell Dot in her apartment. She shut the door, leaned against it. The rain was gone, but her skin remembered each drop. She touched her lips. For the first time in years, she smiled and shivered at once. Sleep refused to settle. At 2:30, she stepped onto the balcony in a shawl. The greenhouse was dark, yet she sensed a glow. Maybe moonlight caught in the spent blossom, maybe memory. A freight train wailed beyond the river, the sound slicing her defenses. She considered texting Elias. His number sat on the widow's sheet, then let the phone drop. Desire, she decided, should ache. Back in bed, she drifted into a dream. Amalfi again. But this time she stood alone on a hot parapet while far below, a man watered gardenias growing straight from the cliff, each blossom shaped like a tiny silver. Charmed out, she woke at dawn, heart racing, the scent of Sirius still in her hair. Outside, the bud had begun to wilt, edges curling inward like spen. Parchment. Its fragile grandeur here and gone felt like both promise and warning. Beauty always charges a fee. She whispered thanks. Before brewing coffee, she broke a single wilted petal from the fallen bloom and pressed it between journal pages, anchoring it beneath tonight's date. She stared at the dark impression it left on paper, sensing it would fade, but its memory, its faint perfume, might linger long enough to lead her back. One day, a week tiptoed past without the shuffle of Ilias's boots in the courtyard. Nora told herself gardeners kept strange schedules, but the quiet felt greedy, the silence too polished. On Tuesday evening, the widow's grandson appeared, clicking shut the greenhouse door and pocketing the key. A polite nod, nothing more. The next dawn, Nora found an envelope wedged beneath her watering can. Urgent family matter. Away indefinitely. Please watch the greenhouse, everything's labeled. I trust your whisper, doubt no signature. Only a small pressed petal taped to the flap. Night blooming Sirius. Browned at the edges dot, so she became keeper of another woman's secrets. Before work and after, she slipped into the humid sanctuary, misting. Orchids, rotating citrus pots, leaving the radio off because jazz sounded like a question she had no answer for. She spoke instead soft fragments about deadlines, about how the city smelled different after rain, about the way loneliness could feel oddly crowded at 3 a.m. The plants listened, green mouths parted, and Nora watered them sparingly, the way Elias had taught. 3 weeks later, thunder rolled in like a stalled freight train, but she braved the downpour to prune a drooping fiddle leaf. Lightning framed her through the glass hair pasted to her temples. Dress clinging, yet inside, she felt strangely lit from within. That same night, Mark, her ex-husband, buzzed the door. He stood in the hall, rain soaking his designer trench. In his hand, a box of the art books he'd forgotten. On his left ring finger, a simple platinum band in Unmistakable. I figured you'd want these back, he said, voice gentle, eyes restless. I'm getting married next month. Nora's pulse barely stuttered. She invited him in, made tea, listened to his practiced gratitude for their shared history. When he asked if she'd like an invitation, she smiled a soft, almost maternal smile and told him no. As he left, Mark paused. You look lighter. Maybe I finally learned how not to drown things I love, she answered, surprising them both. The door closed on a memory without ache. 2 nights later, exactly 1 month since the Sirius bloomed, Elias returned. Nora sensed him before she saw him. The faint creak of the widow's gate, the scent of wet cedar drifting upward. She stepped onto her balcony just as he entered the courtyard's single cone of lamplight. He carried no tools, only a battered canvas duffel and a folded raincoat beneath one arm. She descended barefoot, the metal stair grating against her urgency. When they faced each other, night air thick with petrichor, words fled. It was Elias who broke the hush. The widow fell, he said. Hip fracture, complications. She passed last week. His voice cracked on the last syllable, raw as bark stripped from a limb. Nora reached for his hands. They were colder than the rain. He went on. She left me the greenhouse in her will, provided I relocated to her hometown on the coast, where she first learned to garden. A memorial plot for her and for my wife. He swallowed. I didn't want to leave you guessing, but hospital corridors, they erase time. Nora squeezed his fingers. I kept everything alive, she whispered. They missed you, he managed half a smile. Including the night bloomer? She nodded. Its cutting has new buds, restless ones. Rain steadied into mist. They entered the greenhouse together. Moonlight slid between roof panels, painting the space in pewter and pearl. Plants she had nursed reached toward Elias as though recognizing their maker. He exhaled. Feels smaller than I remembered. Roots outgrow their pots, she murmured. 2 mugs still hung on a nail from there. Last evening, her lipstick faint on one rim. Elias took it down, brushed the edge with his thumb. I replayed that night on the coast, he said, over and over until I could name the terror behind wanting you. What name did you find? Nora asked. Permission, he set the mug aside. To want something after. To let joy be loud. Again, heat fluttered low in her belly bowl, frightening. She touched the chain at her throat, now whole, and regret. Regret is not loving sooner. His confession flickered like candlelight, fragile yet fierce. But desire isn't a renewal of the past, Nora. It's a seed for what hasn't existed. Tears stung her eyes, gratitude, fear, a cocktail of memories. You're moving, she managed, in 6 weeks. I'll dismantle, transplant, rebuild. He paused. I could use a partner who speaks in whispers. The proposition quivered between them, equal parts invitation and test. Nora thought of her copy editing desk, of lavender mornings on the balcony, of solitude that had become both refuge and cage. She also thought of coastal air salted and rough, of nights thick with jasmine and possibility. She paced to the serious cutting, 3 buds, moon pale, trembling with unspent bloom. Transporting her will be tricky, she said. We'll crate her carefully, he answered, stepping closer. His reflection merged with hers in the glass. A question rose in her. Can I trust this fragile thing to survive the move? But another quieter, stronger replied, can I forgive myself if I never let it try? She turned, lifting his hand to her lips, a silent yes, half blessing, half claim. Elias drew her into a kiss deeper than the first, less frantic, more certain. Mouths parted, breaths mingled. The greenhouse seemed to pulse with green heartbeat. When they separated, Nora rested her forehead against his. Let's not call it starting over, she said. Let's call it continuing to grow. He laughed softly, the sound hoarse with relief. Agreed. The 6 weeks raced by on wings of soil and sweat. Dot by day, they catalogued every plant, wrapped roots in damp burlap, labeled crates in Ilias's looping hand. By evening, they collapsed on the terrace, sharing takeout and stories that filled old silences. Sometimes they fought over pruning angles, over whether a vine could handle direct sun during transit. But each argument ended with a touch that said, I'm still here. Mark's wedding announcement arrived in Nora's inbox. She archived it without opening. Work accepted her remote editing proposal with surprising enthusiasm. The world, it seemed, bent easily when she stopped bracing against it. The night before departure, they hosted a quiet farewell. 2 folding chairs, understrung bulbs, the greenhouse empty, but for the serious, last to be packed. Friends from the building wandered in, sipping wine among bare shelves. As the guests drifted out, Nora traced her finger along the cedar bench where she and Elias had first shared truths. Ready? He asked. No, she said, smiling, but willing. They wheeled the serious crate outside just past midnight. A breeze lifted the tarp, exposing 1 top bud. Nora gas pedals had begun to uncurl, minutes earlier than predicted. Wait, Elias murmured. They set the crate down. Under the apartment's single security lamp, the bloom unfurled in real-time ivory flames, revealing a golden heart. The fragrance rushed over them, thick with vanilla and rain. Nora felt tears slip free. Second chances shouldn't be this. Beautiful. Elias wrapped his arms around her from behind. There when we water lightly, he whispered. His lips brushed the shell of her ear-subtle, reverent. The flower reached full openness, a silent trumpet announcing a life no longer stalled. In its center, a droplet of nectar trembled, reflecting their entwined silhouettes. Nora turned within. His embrace, palm to his cheek. Let's promise, she said, voice barely above the hum of the streetlight, never to drown what we hope to keep. He nodded, forehead against hers. And to let roots ache so they remember to dig deep. They kissed again, slow burn, certain while the night blooming Sirius witnessed. Then began its gradual collapse back into darkness dotted dawn. A moving van idled at the curb. Nora carried the fern, now lush and daring, to the passenger seat. Elias packed the last toolbox, then climbed in beside her. As the van pulled away, she stared at the rearview mirror, the townhouse shrinking, balcony gardens swaying in farewell, lavender and jasmine nodding like proud elders. She did not feel hollow, nor drowning. She felt ache-alive, necessary. She slipped her hand into Elias's. He squeezed, eyes on the road, unfurling toward salt and sky. Somewhere ahead, a greenhouse awaited reassembly. Petals awaited midnight, and regrets waited to be mulched into fertile ground. Nora exhaled, tasting promise. They drove on, two caretakers carrying whispers, daring beauty to bloom wherever they chose to root.